In this video, I will demonstrate how to apply modern DevOps to modernize a WebSphere application and migrate it to OpenShift using containers. From the main website, go to Workshops, then go to Add Modernization. So this lab requires you to already have an OpenShift cluster, install the toolkit, and set up the workshop. You can find instructions here. There's a video that goes in deep how to install it, but as to do a quick overview, again, I can do it here, but watch the video to see two types of installations. You can use the Open Labs, which is free for 8 hours, even with a free IBM Cloud account. So we'll open this, then select Lab 6, bring your own application, sign in with your free IBM Cloud account or standard account. You get a cluster with 2 nodes. You get also a terminal. You can get to the OpenShift console by clicking quick links. Then click here to open the console. You're logged in into your IBM Cloud account with the free cluster. You can scroll down to find the command line to log in. I'm not going to use this terminal. I'm going to use my own computer. So I'm going to copy this command and copy it down to my computer. So I'm going to move this to the side and paste the command here to log in. Now we're going to install the toolkit and set up the workshop. Go back to the lab, copy the install the toolkit command, paste it. After a few minutes, the toolkit is installed. Now set up the workshop. Copy the command, paste the command. Now with the toolkit installed, I'm going to make sure that I have the latest version of the CLI. I'm not going to run this shell setup because I'm running locally. I'm just going to check and install the latest version of the CLI. So if you scroll down and click here, you can paste it here. And then this would install the latest version of the Toolkit CLI. Return back to the lab. The next step is to install a database instance that will be used by all the users. This is to be done by a cluster administrator. So copy the command, since we already logged in, and paste the command. For the next step, we're going to use Transformation Advisor to analyze our monolith WebSphere application to see what are the changes necessary to containerize it. For that, we're going to follow the modernizing runtimes with liberty from the modernization playbook. There's many assets in here to help you modernize your applications, to move them from, for example, WebSphere, to move them to OpenShift, going from modernizing the operations of it, or modernizing the runtime, or the application itself. In this case, we're going to concentrate on the runtime because we're going to be running on OpenShift in containers. So the section that we're going to take a look first is to the analyze, and we're going to use Transformation Advisor, which you can run on Kubernetes or OpenShift, or you can run it locally in your computer. In my case, I have it. I downloaded it, and I have it in my computer. So let's get it started and access Transformation Advisor. So I'm going to move to the terminal. And now I'm going to run the script to launch Transformation Advisor, and it will take a minute or so to get it started, and we can access it with the browser when it gives us the IP address and port. To Transformation Advisor running, let's go and open that in the browser. Copy the URL. Create a new workspace. Call it Customer Other Services. Create a collection. Call it like WAS 855 App Server 01. I'm going to move it to the side. So I have my instructions. For the data collection, we already did the data collection on the WebSphere application server, and we got the results back. So we're going to upload the app server zip file with the results. Go back to the lab to find the link. And now you can upload it. As you can see, our application selected the WebSphere application Liberty as the target. This is going to be the app that we're going to be working with. It's customer order service app. If we go back to the playbook goes over the details of the findings to analyze the results. For example, here you will find recommendations based on the rules and estimation of the changes. We already did all the changes. Mainly was how to load the EJBs and find the class loader, and also change some of the XML files to find to use a different library for Wings. All the details are located here, and also that's available in the build. The build goes over the changes for example, the server.xml, and changing the way to load lookups the EJBs, and also creating a Docker file with the base of the transformation advisor. We already did that, so we're going to give this as some homework if we want to go through it, but we already did these changes, and we pushed this into a Git repository that we're going to use to containerize this application. Instead of running on a VM, we're going to be running on a container on OpenShift. So go back to the lab, and we're going to move to the next step, which is setting up the environment. Our next step is to set up our workshop user. So copy the command. This will be for user 1. If you have user 2, then change it to user 2, and so on. I'm just going to be using user 1. Then you're going to log in with that user if you're not using IBM Cloud. But since I'm using it, I'm going to skip the login. The next step is to set up the workshop prefix that we're going to be using. So project 1 for user 1, project 2 for user 2, and so on. The next step, we're going to create a project or namespace with the suffix dev and our prefix our project 1 or project 2, depending which user you selected. Copy the command and paste that command. This will also copy the config maps and secrets from the Toolkit tools namespace to this namespace, so we can use it from the CI/CD pipeline. The next step, we're going to fork the Git repository for the Liberty AppMod application in Java that we already went through the TA transformation advisor process, and we're going to create a fork of that Git repo for our user. So user 1 and user 2 will have different Git repos, different projects, and different CI/CD pipelines. So for that, let's go to the OpenShift console. In the menu, if you refresh, you will find all the Toolkit tools. So go ahead and refresh, and now you can see all the Toolkit tools. Open the dashboard. In the dashboard, these are the tools that we're using in the pipeline. There's also learning activities, and then go to starter kits. In starter kit, you will find the Git repository with our WebSphere application that we modernize and change to make it be able to containerize it. So click on Liberty AppMod, then click on fork. We want to make a fork for user 1. So log in as user 1 or user 2, depending which user you're using. Password is just password, the word password, and sign in. And then click fork repository. This will be the application that will be containerizing with our CI/CD pipeline and also deploying with Git Ups. So you can see it has a Docker file, and it also has some Helm YAML files to deploy. So with that, let's return back to the page of the lab. The next step, we're going to compose the Git URL for user 1 or user 2, depending which user you have. So copy the command and paste the command in the terminal. So this is our unique URL for user 1. The next step, we're going to register the pipeline with that Git URL. So copy the command and paste the command. This step, it will create a Git webhook, register our Git repository, and start a pipeline. Every time you make a change now to the Git repository, a new pipeline will run. Open the URL that is printed at the bottom to see the pipeline running. Copy the URL. The pipeline is running and it will go through all the steps until it finishes on pushing the YAML files into a Git Ups repository. So this is a good time to take a break and we'll return when the pipeline is done. One of the first steps is test. It does unit tests and also quality code checking using, for example, SonarQube. So let's check the SonarQube results of the pipeline. Click a menu, select SonarQube, and this SonarQube is running on the cluster, but it can be an external SonarQube. As you can see, the project is registered and the findings are here. So things that SonarQube does, or any other tool that does code quality or code checking, it can do code coverage, it could do code smells, it can find security problems, security hotspots, and so on. And that's the review that you can do, and put certain rules when you want to stop the pipeline or just review the pipeline for problems. Return back to the pipeline. And the next step is build. So this step, we will create the container image and push it to the internal registry. So it can be used for the next step, which is a quick build and deploy of the application locally, just for smoke testing and checking that any YAML files or manifest files are okay. And then the next step is a health check, which is a ping against a URL endpoint to check that it can be reachable from the external ingress or route. Then the next step, it would check on what's the latest version or tag semantic version on the Git repo, bump the version to the next one, and then create a Git tag with the semantic versioning, which then it gets passed to the next task, that it takes the image and it pushes this image with that tag to an external registry, or the internal registry of the OpenShift cluster. In our case, we're pushing to that one, so we can check in the toolkit. You will find the image registry, or this could be an external registry. If we click on it and we filter by project 1-dev, we should find here the image stream, and we should find at the bottom the image with the Git hash and also with the semantic version. So this is the image to be deployed and packaged into the next environments. If we return back to the pipeline, that image with the YAML manifest files are encapsulated into a Helm release, which is a Helm chart. And this Helm chart, it gets stamped and built and packaged and then pushed to a artifact server. In our case, we're using Artifactory, and that is installed in the cluster by the toolkit. So if you go to the console and check Artifactory, you can see the Helm chart there. Go to artifacts, generic project 1-dev, and you can see there's a Helm chart that has the reference to that image with the image tag, and this Helm chart also has the same version, so there's a correlation. Return back to the pipeline, and the next step, the previous step also did an image scan. So if this is a security scan using either Trivi, which is open source, or using the IBM scan if you're using IBM registry. And the final step is Git Ups. This is pushing the reference to that YAML file or Helm chart into a Git repository, but this is different from the application Git repository that we're using. This is a Git Ups centralized Git repository by the whole team that it can hold different applications. So let's check if our files are pushed to that Git repository by this task. If you go to the menu and select Git Ups, that will open the Git server against the Git Ups repository. And if we go to the QA, because that will be the next stage to deploy the application, we check project 1, and then we check add mod file for our application. And here you will find a Helm repository or Helm chart referencing our image. So our image is version 1.0.0, and the image is referenced by the Helm repository located in the Artifactory URL. Other than that, you can go to the values.yaml and overwrite any values that you want for the different environment, QA, staging, pre-prod, prod, and change any of the values, overwrite any of the values for the Helm chart. If we return back, so for this step, we're going to deploy the application into a different namespace called project 1 dash QA. So if we go to project QA and we go to developer topology, the application is not running here. There's no pipelines in here because the pipelines always run in the dev environment. So to promote the application on this namespace or project, we're going to be using Argo. By using Argo, we're going to take the files that are in the Git Ups repo, these files, and we're going to use Argo to sync the files. So any change in here, it will trigger a deployment to the namespace project 1-QA. So for that, return back to OpenShift, and we can launch Argo from the Toolkit menu and log in via OpenShift. And now you can filter by project 1-QA. And what we're going to do, this is a different app. This is not our app. We're going to deploy another app in here. So if you click new app, and we're going to create an application definition in Argo pointing to that Git repository. So I'm going to move it to the side so I can copy paste some values from the lab. So let's move the lab to the side. And we're going to give it a name. We can give it project 1 or project 2, depending which user you're using, dash QA. Or we can do, let's do QA dash WebSphere Liberty. Project, you can select the default project of Argo. This is related to Argo, not to OpenShift. Switch to automatic, check prune and self-healing. And then the Git repository is the location of this Git repository. We can take it from there, or we can just copy it from the lab. So I'm going to copy it from the lab. For revision, you can leave it a head or change to a branch. We're going to leave it to head. For the path, if you click on it, you will see the path to the folder that we were looking at. For cluster, select the in cluster, and for namespace, we want to deploy to project 1-QA. That will be the project that we don't have any apps, and we're going to promote it there. It detected that it was a Helm type of release, and we're going to click create. So you can see it created a new application in Argo, and it's already syncing and deploying the pod. So if we move back to the OpenShift, we should see the app starting with one pod. When the application starts, you can open the URL or the route, and then we're going to paste the path to the endpoint of the application. So we go back to the lab, and the endpoint is customer order service web. Copy and then put that in the application. It will prompt us for a username and password. So go back to the lab, and then you can paste the username is R Garcia, and then password is Blowfish. As you can see, our application, this application was built and designed in 2008, but it's an application now that instead of running on WebSphere application server on IBM or ND, now it's running on OpenShift. And this is one way of moving an application from a monolith completely, or parts of a service into a container. So with that, now we return back to the topology. And now anytime that the developer makes a change to the Git repository, in here, the pipeline will start again and deploy the application, build a new image, create a new Helm chart with a new version, and then push to the QA folder for the Git Ups server, where Argo will promote it to QA. And then from here, you can configure Argo with different applications to promote it to staging, test, or production in this cluster or in a different cluster. So that's the lab to modernize an application, to move it from WebSphere, and then using CI, using OpenShift pipelines, and using CD, like Git Ups, to promote the application to have a modern DevOps pipeline. With that, we're done. And thank you.